Hi, I'm Michael.
And I'm Malcolm.
And welcome to On the Sofa. Today we're talking about Pilates breathing, which is a big subject and very important because it's one of the things, it's essential that we do. But there's different styles of breath, and we use breath differently depending on what we want it to do. If we want it to protect and help the client, then we'll breathe a certain style. If we want to challenge the client, then we're going to switch that around.
But before you do any breath cueing, it's kind of useful to see if the client has an issue with breathing in general or has done some work with breath before. So for me, if I'm trying to teach someone to work with a specific breath, a training breath, and our Pilates breath is a training breath, it's not a natural breath. That's the first thing that I've had some clients. And again, the public conventions are wonderful because we get the people coming to us who are going to classes, often lots of different styles of classes, different teachers from different schools, which they enjoy. But that even adds to the confusion because there's not one consistent message they're getting. And they go to us, I just don't understand, and they don't even know which question to frame. They're just, breath is this thing of, in their mind.
And now I've had students, that get confused about the breathing, and so I always say to them first, listen, this is not a normal way of breathing. What we're doing with our Pilates breath is certainly not normal. We're normally natural breath is when we're asleep, we're breathing in and out through our abdominals. So as soon as we ask them to change that natural breath, it does become a training breath. Now, definitely when you breathe in and when you breathe out will change your movement, and mainly because it's going to either challenge you or help you. Out breath on the effort is always going to help create that stability and give you some support.
There's lots of anatomy behind that, but basically we're hardwired that when you breathe out, you are more guaranteed to get assistance, or more guaranteed that your support structure, your deep support structure, is working efficiently for protection of the lower back. And that system, if it's working efficiently, and that includes your upper body stability and deep stabilizing muscles as well, if that system's working efficiently, everything else takes less stress and does the job and shares it. So it's very much a harmonious system. And the out breath will help you as you learn to control that movement or challenge yourself. Once you have that control, that's when we can play with the breath. The key thing that we play with breath is not the style, we stick to our Pilates breath, but whether it's an in-breath or an out-breath. But you can't do anything with breath until you work out if someone has a restricted normal breath.
Now, with all the different styles of Pilates, which are varied, there are some quite aggressive breathing styles and quite loud breathing styles of Pilates. We feel that if you force the breath, you're going to involve a lot more of the upper body, and so we don't want to dominate using the muscles of the chest and take away from working the effectiveness of the center. So we prefer working with a gentle, a light breath, but we're trying to increase capacity all the time.
Well, it's more of a natural effort. So instead of doing a forced out, which will bring in quite a lot of muscle contraction everywhere, and it might not, and it's going to possibly for some people conflict, but they'll feel tension, so they'll maybe feel good because they think, well, it's working, I can feel myself working. So we go for a more natural breath, which would be the breath Michael's doing right now, in the sense of effort. Now, in through the nose, does all the moisturizing, all that fun stuff. Out through the mouth, and a relaxed mouth is actually healthier for all of our tensions we hold in the upper body, and it releases a lot of the respiratory muscles that run your neck, the ribcage, it releases them to do their job a little bit more. If you do a tensed upper jaw, and some people say purse the lips, and so you hear but that effort itself creates tension in the neck. And if that's where people are holding tension already, it's kind of not logical to tense them up. So you could sit and argue and I say argue because it can get that way when you get passion behind people's opinions. But you can get that strong debate, shall we say, between people because they're coming from a different perspective. One's coming from remedial, one's coming from operatics, so you get lots of different opinions there. The key thing is the client should feel good once they finish, not more stressed and tense.
Now, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth is a great way of measuring the length of the breath, because we want them both to be equal. And this will help bring in the other principles of Pilates, like flow, so that we're getting a continuous movement. So in through the nose, out through the mouth is an effective way of measuring that length of the breath.
I have to mention over breath. One of my pet things is when people dictate the length of my breath. Now, if you're practicing your breathing muscles themselves, practicing extending the length is one thing. But for me, one of my pet ones, I have to do this, is when people click their fingers at me and say, you're going to breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and then out, 2, 3, 4. 4 is my number, by the way. It's the number I put to my own breath. But your breath, when you count in your head, it could be 4 or 5. But the key thing is the consistency of your breath, and can you, over time, create a fuller breath? And that would mean your breath would take longer. For a natural evacuation of the lungs, then a natural inhalation to fill the lungs, that will be your breath, which could be different to someone next to you, whether you've had surgery to the chest and one lung's been removed, which is fairly obvious that someone's going to have a different breath. But asthmatic, if you've had a history of asthma, bad posture, very closed chests, which are very common posture types, no one's going to breathe efficiently when they're closed down. So if you try to dictate a strong breath onto someone who's already struggling to get a normal breath, then we're definitely adding to complications. So I know I'll say this, so you can say it differently if you think otherwise, but we encourage the idea that you find your breath, the only bad breath is holding your breath. And so we have the goal of getting to the breath working for you in the movements. Some movements more important than others, but the priority is not that you do the specific breath and that's the key for every part of every movement, because that's too intense for people. We'll layer it on gradually with a bit more focus, and as they get more experienced, our expectation of their ability to work with breath becomes higher, their ability to put that on themselves comes higher, but without the stress, without the anxiety of, should I breathe in, should I breathe out? If you're that stressed, guess what you're not doing? Breathing. So just breathe. And
there was great stories about Romana and some of the other elders of Pilates saying when they're asked, should I breathe in and breathe out by the student, they would just say, just breathe, stop asking me.
It's my favourite phrase, I love it.
Yeah, just stop asking me, just breathe. And definitely, as Malcolm said, the only bad breath is not breathing. We are trying to increase the capacity, and many times this is restricted because of bad posture and tight muscles. So insisting on a breath length is a little bit unfair to the client if they don't have that capacity to increase. Even with dancers have got gorgeous flexibility and gorgeous bodies come in, and many times they're locked in that diaphragm. So I would always allow people to find their breath pattern, to explore the breath pattern, rather than put a fixed time on it.
I was thinking about what you said. There's an aspect of this idea of how you're saying your breath cueing. Is, are you doing what we would call a hard cue? And a hard cue doesn't really allow them to make a decision for themselves, for their body in their moment. A hard cue says, do this now, do this way. I feel that applies to safety, certainly, but it shouldn't really apply to breath. A soft cue is one that has permissions layered into it. So this is what I'm suggesting the breath is. If that's distracting you, just breathe. This is what I think you'll find will help you with the movement quality. If it's not that, change it around and see what happens. That would be more collaborative in its cueing form, and it's a softer cue because it's not putting on stress, it's giving choice. That takes skill to deliver that type of cueing and experience, but also it takes a lot of trust for the client to start to trust that they can make those decisions. So sometimes when they're used to being told, move your foot there, do your hand there, breathe, and then you don't give them that strong direction, they can get quite confused.
Yeah, I think also this comes back to, your teaching style. You might be quite a directive teacher, and clients love being directed, because that way then they don't have to think so much. So if you're more of an inclusive style teacher, that means where you're involving the client in the process. You're asking them to learn it, you're asking them to understand and learn their Pilates. So I think part of what we have to consider is how we do teach. As I say, people love to be told what to do, when to breathe in, when to breathe out. But then that's not good. That kind of limits their exploration of understanding their breath journey and seeing if they can begin to start increasing that capacity of the breath.
I mean, let's take it. Animals don't think about when they're breathing; they just breathe.
No, our little Coco's not thinking about when to breathe in, when to breathe out.
I think for me, the biggest thing is I don't only hear clients getting stressed about it. And as soon as we're doing something that's causing the client to get stressed and anxious, we need to change what we're doing. We need to find another way of communicating. That's a communication breakdown. But when teachers come to me stressed about the breath, we really have to fall back on the basic main principle is the only bad breath is holding your breath. And then the key to me on that one for the teachers that I try and get them to relax is start to really learn a little bit about normal breathing anatomy. And and even clients, I'll show clients about what's happening with normal breath, how neck muscles work, how if your alignment's closed. So practical methods and communicating them to your client can actually help you as a teacher get more confident about why someone's struggling. So is that make it practical, your games with breath.
And put priority on it. I mean, a lot of the original Pilates teachers, Carola Trier, Kathy Grant, Ron Fletcher. With Ron, you had to learn to breathe first before you learned to move. Kathy Grant or Carola, I forget which one it was, you had to sit for 5 minutes before you started your Pilates breathing. So if you put priority on breath and take time to say, okay, this month is going to be a breath month, or this week, or this class is going to be a breath-focused class, then I think then you put more importance on it. There is a lot to think about when you're doing your Pilates movements, and I think breath is obviously one of those things we should be thinking about to make that movement work well. So
I would say 100%. In some movements, breath is essential to be part of, excuse me, of the movement being safe, but also getting the best results from the movement. Other movements, they're going to work. The breath is not critical in that moment to the movement happening as well as it can. It's not many like that, but there's enough. So in those movements, definitely, that's when you could take the chill pill and just say, let's de-stress about the breath here. Just keep breathing. Those are the ones where they can just enjoy moving. And then the ones that are specific, I think the classic is the spine twist. The ones which are specific, where the breath is really key to working well, then those ones, yes, the breath has to be more emphasized. But to emphasize it for a whole half hour, 45 minutes, 1 hour class, it can take over the thoughts process of the clients.
But definitely, I see Pilates and breath as one. You know, Pilates is breath and movement together. Movement without breath is not Pilates. It's just movement. It's valid, but it's not movement. So we have to put that relationship between the two things together and make it a priority.
And my final word on that one would be, I think it's really important for all of us to remember, a training breath is for a purpose in the moment. But with doing our Pilates breathing, we're teaching all of the muscles of respiration to work better, to be more efficient in our normal breathing. So a side effect of the breath being used specifically in the movements for one goal or another is that the normal breathing will improve naturally, whether it's through your posture opening out, create space for the breath, or whether it's those muscles involved are just getting exercised more, so therefore they're working better. It's that thing of use it or lose it. If you don't use your full breath pattern well, it's not going to get any better. You need to do something to help it get better, and that's Pilates for me. That's the routine for me as a Pilates teacher.
So enjoy your classes, enjoy your breathing, maybe give some homework to your students just to do breath at home and just to increase that capacity outside of the Pilates class. And we'll see you on another talk here on the sofa next time.
And remember, if you do have any things you'd like us to chat about, to express our opinions, they don't always have to be fully Pilates, but industry related would be good. Then let us know, and we'll be delighted to bounce ideas off each other sitting here on the sofa.
See you guys soon.
Bye.
Bye.